This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads From The Crypt podcast.
Jason, come on in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. Today's episode asks, what do horror movies, parenting, and podcasting have in common? The answer is actually really short, sweet, and simple. The Dads From The Crypt podcast. One of the main reasons there's a How Not to Make a Movie podcast is because there's a Dads From The Crypt podcast. I'll dive into the story momentarily, but one of the pleasures of podcasting, for me anyway, is watching other podcasters, especially ones I know, succeed. There are tons of reasons why podcasting is exploding now. One of them is because podcasts can have horror podcasting and parenting in common. I first met Jason Stein, one of the Dads From The Crypt, 4 years ago. Hardcore horror fans, Jason and his friends Jody, Webster, and Armando Aguilar had created a podcast during the lockdown as a way of keeping their sanity. The concept was simple, but delightfully offbeat. The three would review every single episode of HBO's iconic Tales from the Crypt and also give parenting advice. Thus, Dads from the Crypt. Jason, Jody, and Armando recognized early on that podcasting is the ultimate grassroots medium, totally DIY where content creation is concerned. All you have to do is find your audience and help them find you. Do that, and you can succeed on your terms, doing something you love. And the money, should there be any, and that's not entirely far-fetched at all. You may not get rich doing this, but you might just pay the bills and keep the lights on and even pay for a nice vacay or two every year for as long as the podcast lasts. There are challenges, make no mistake, but it's nothing that hard work and dedication can't conquer. Make great content, or content people want, you're halfway there. As I said, the reason there's a How Not to Make a Movie podcast is because one day Jason invited me to guest on their podcast while they reviewed one of the episodes that I wrote. We did it, and it went great. A few weeks later, Jason contacted me again. This time he said, we're going to review Bordello of Blood, the second Tales from the Crypt branded feature film that we produced back in the 1990s. You want to sit in with us again, he asked. Jason, I said, telling the Bordello of Blood story is more than just a podcast episode. Why, it's and here's where the clouds parted, a whole podcast unto itself. Because they were so instrumental in creating How Not to Make a Movie podcast, I made the Dads from the podcast permanent executive producers. But Jason is more than just a Crypt fan, a parent, and a podcaster. He's joined the ranks of movie makers, too. We'll talk about Recipe for Talent, a visit with Mike Vosberg, a documentary Jason shot about his visit to Crypt cover artist Mike Vosberg's studio. It really is an amazing world where one person's passion for something, like Jason's passion for Crypt, can open doors to unexpected choices and paths. So, what do horror, parenting, and podcasting have in common? Way, way, way more than you'd think.
You don't use the video, right?
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. Never mind. You do. That's fine.
You want to do a wardrobe change?
No.
You can if you want to.
I could put pants on if you want, but
well, then I'll feel obligated to put pants on. So no. Well, Jason and I, we just did an episode of Dads from the Crypt, where among the other things that you review now, since you've run out of episodes of Tales from the Crypt to review, you've been editing. Well, now you're editing the EC comics as just before they publish. What other things have you been reviewing out at Dads from the Crypt?
Yeah, so I think it's always an ever-evolving podcast since we finished Tales from the Crypt. And then we did some Black Mirror, then we did some Twilight Zone, and we did some Creep Show episodes. And I mean, Easy Comics is always kind of part of our DNA. So I've been really since now that we've had this revival that started over the summer, it's been really important to me to like kind of be part of that and kind of, since we don't have any like other new, EC things to really talk about. So it's been really enjoyable to have those things. And I've been, sometimes they're swings and misses, sometimes they're, they're home runs, as like anything. But I've been really enjoying that. But I think now we did some like staff picks for a couple months just to have some fun for some movies and stuff. And some stuff that was a little out of our wheelhouse or just for fun, shits and giggles. We did a Sam Neill month just because we started one Sam Neill movie and then we're like, well, we're gonna do one, let's just do some more. And we did like
Why
Dead.
not? He doesn't get enough love, Sam Neill.
I know. No, that's really true though. He's like I've never seen Dead Calm before. With Billy Zane, really good movie. I really enjoyed that one.
Very good movie. Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
did In the Mouth of Madness. I think that's what all started. That's one of Mondo's favorite movies, and he was having a little rough patch. One of his beloved animals passed away, so he said he just choose whatever comfort movie you want to talk about. So he chose In the Mouth of Madness because apocalyptic John Carpenter movies always hit the spot. And then we did Event Horizon, which is another Sam Neill personal favorite of mine. Day Calm, and I always forget the other one we did is, but yeah, you can never go wrong. And then so now we're going back to doing Creep Show, the TV series, by Greg Nicotero, among many other people, and John Harrison is very involved with that as well. But we're kind of alternating that with movies, at least that's what we've been doing the last couple months, as if that one week at the beginning of November wasn't bad enough. Tony Todd passed away, which is huge devastation to the horror community. Like it's like a huge light went out, so we decided to review Candyman and just to pay tribute. And then we're doing a movie called Blood Rage this week. Al, have you heard of this one?
I have not.
It's kind of a mid 80s psycho slasher movie centered around Thanksgiving. But it's one of those that like anything and everything can happen in this kind of movie. It's just not much makes sense. Like you can tell it's like it's gonzo filmmaking kind of thing where we're just filming shit and then we'll fix it in the edit somehow, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like I think if I'm not mistaken, depending on what version you watch, like they put on the wrong title card for the movie, like doesn't match what's on the label of the DVD. It's one of those like it's just a beauable mess. And those are kind of movies I love.
An epic example of how not to make a movie. I
Well,
can't believe
this is an example of how not to make how not to make a movie in the conventional way, but turns out to be something really enjoyable if you're the right type of people. Like some movies are bad, and some movies are bad good, and some movies are good. So I think especially genre slash horror fans, whatever you want to call us, we can really enjoy a bad good movie, a movie that's bad, but it has so much. There's something about that so charming that we really enjoy, and that's a lot of my favorite movies are like that.
charmingly inept.
Yes, exactly. Like on every me measurable metric, it should fail, but it just has some sort of special juice that makes it worth watching. And it's like a kind of thing where like 9 out of 10 people will go like, no, that's awful. I don't want to watch. I would never watch that again. For me, I'm like, give it to me more. Like, I mean, my biggest um example of that is Sleepaway Camp, which again is another 80s slasher movies that again the acting is bad, the script is bad, but everyone is trying so hard to make a movie, I'm not saying good movie, but a movie that it just and there's just so many bizarre moments that it's just so charming and I just love it to pieces.
You feel very compelled to keep the conversation going between the dads from the crypt.
Yeah, I mean it's something that we all three of us enjoy. It's it's yeah, I don't know. As long as we're enjoying it, we'll keep doing it. And we get some episodes get more listeners than others, or other times a year. And I try not. I mean, it's fun to watch it when those things happen, but when it doesn't, you kind of like, okay, I had a good
Would you
time
say
making that.
would you say that podcasting has, for want of a better term, become part of your life?
Oh, well, yes, you can look around the room, but It's funny because I saw someone say that podcasting now is what starting a garage band in the 60s and 70s was to, that generation. So you just want an excuse to get with the guys. You know what you're doing isn't technically that impressive on a quality level, but you enjoy doing it. And you're creating a little bit of dialogue with some other people. Um, that's the fun part.
I love the DIY
Hmm.
nature of it. The pandemic leveled the playing field in a
Right.
really profound way. Before the pandemic, if you wanted to be a broadcaster in any way, shape, or form, you had to be pristine.
Yeah. Well, I think
But the pandemic changed that because everyone had to stay home, and a lot of people had to broadcast. Journalists were all broadcasting from their basements via Zoom,
right.
and
Well,
suddenly that became an acceptable.
mhm.
Yeah, the Zoom
Well,
technology is
I
good
think
for everybody.
I think the barrier to entry hit at the right moment of the pandemic. Like if a pandemic had happened a couple years before, I think the entry level, at least at that time, might have been a little higher, and then maybe it would have accelerated. But
Oh,
I think the barrier to entry was just at that moment becoming low enough for the average person to jump into it.
oh, indeed, and the the way that the legacy media has been fracturing and losing.
Mhm.
Social media has undone
For better or
really,
for worse.
yeah,
Because I
one way
mean,
or the other. Certainly my kids do not get their news in any way, shape, or form from legacy media. They never did. And after this past election, it has been catastrophic for all the legacy media except Fox. NBC, MSNBC
yeah.
literally lost half its audience.
Yeah,
Lost
well, I
half
think
its audience.
I'm curious if they'll come back because yeah, I did a media blackout for a couple days, and I'm still not nearly at the level I was. I'm slowly creeping back. So I think people will come back to some degree, but yeah, it really did change that. And I think the promise of the internet is that everyone will have an equal voice or able to access any other voice, which on paper sounds like a great um thing that it sounds like a great vision, but at the same time, should everyone have an equal say or an equal weight to a voice? Like if someone is knowledgeable about something, now they're on the exact same footing ground as someone who can just talk out of their ass about
But
something
that
and just
is but
pretends.
that is where America is right now.
Exactly.
That
That's
is
just,
that is what this last election was all about.
mhm.
Expertise is no longer relevant to a lot of people. And I wouldn't say it's not relevant to everyone because there are an awful lot of us. When when this is finally all done, yeah, I think expertise will remain standing because they know how to keep the lights on.
Yeah. Well, hopefully,
But
yeah. But we
we
don't
will
need to get
get
down
there.
that. Yeah.
But in the meantime, what I like about, well, I think legacy media is going to run scared for a couple of years, and because they're going to run scared, they will become a less and less reliable voice. I
Hmm.
think I think journalism, American journalism, because it's going to vacate the premises of mainstream media because it doesn't want to cross a line. It won't be able to if it wants to be able to stay a broadcaster. So a lot of journalism will shed journalists, and those where will those journalists land? They're going to land in podcasting.
Right.
And I think, hey, Rachel Maddow's done some brilliant podcasts. Her ultra podcasts are fantastic. Rachel Maddow's already here, and so a lot of
Mhm.
people will like Rachel. They will the the next version of American journalism will rise out of podcasting, and because especially when I turned off the news, I turned right to podcasting, and I'm not brokenhearted about that because I've discovered a world filled with wonderful voices telling amazing stories. I love the fact that I'm part of it. I hope you love the fact that you're part of this amazing
Oh yeah. My
community
which again,
of DIYers.
which again is a great promise. My worry about that. I don't know if this is what we really want to talk about this whole time, but my worry about that is that now you only subscribe to the podcast that you agree with or that are telling you what you want to hear. And that's why I like listening to other dissenting voices. So like in LA, there isn't really on the AMs, there isn't really any progressive radio. I mean, there used to be like Air America and I'm sure there were other things, but those don't exist anymore. So the only thing on AM radio is either sports or relatively right-wing commentators.
on
So
on
when I'm
on the radio, but
well, what I'm saying
gosh,
is, I'm saying as an example. So
yeah,
I hate listen to a lot of those because I want to hear what the other side, what their thoughts are, how they're perceiving things, and I want to keep myself open to that. But on the flip side, when you're listening, when you're choosing what podcast to listen to, I think a lot. I'm worried about the trend being that you're going to be listening to the stories told in the ways that confirm your own biases, and I want to have my bias. That's why I try to find podcasts that give um other perspectives. Like the one I listen to every Friday is Left, Right, and Center, where they have a journalist and a Republican strategist and a Democratic strategist. And yeah, the Republican isn't like a MAGA head or anything, but at least like they're giving a different perspective and they're kind of showing both sides of the stories.
I will say I cut politics out completely. I don't even listen. I do not listen to political podcasts at
Yeah.
this particular moment. I think the dust is still settling, and I
No, yeah,
don't
no,
think.
I that's the only one I still listen to at the moment.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I cut back out all the other ones I was listening to.
I'm I'm more interested in just the storytelling and just
Yeah.
the human, hearing. A lot of podcasting is so simple. It's two people with, for instance, with a love of history, going through history, talking about stuff that they just researched and
Hmm.
having a cool conversation about it. That's what an awful lot of podcasting is. And it's really quite delightful. It's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Dads from the Crypt, it's three horror fans talking about something that they love and giving parenting advice, which is brilliant. It's just
Yeah.
a brilliant idea. What other medium could you do that in except for podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's another podcast I was recently on called A History According to, where they take a movie and they talk about the historical, how historically accurate is this movie in the times, and it's a fun little premise. It's mostly tongue in cheek. I mean, they do a little bit of research, like they did like my all time favorite movies is Glory, the Civil War unit,
Sure, sure.
first made of African American soldiers, and they kind of talked about like what was true and what did they embellish and everything, and but sometimes they do like 300, which again, it's so long ago, you only the history is written by the winners, so it's really hard to determine what was true in that story and what wasn't. But it's interesting kind of to look at like, which parts of it were stylistically embellished. But yeah, there's a podcast for everything, it seems like now, which is great.
And uh, my little podcast company, one of the things that is so thrilling is that, well, I've come to believe that everyone, because everyone has a story, has at least
Mhm.
one podcast in them. Now, some people have multiple podcasts, but everyone really, if you sit down and you begin to get under the surface of who they are, and this goes to what you were saying, hearing everybody.
Mhm.
Because yeah, okay, one of the things that has clearly happened is that we ain't hearing each other. Okay, okay. One of the ways to hear each other is to hear each other's stories.
Mhm.
And my goal is, hey, as we believe everyone has a story or at least one podcast in them, is to tell each and every one of those stories.
Right.
The mission statement is, what Tika no Lam is, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, it's the idea that it's every one of our obligations, whether you like it or not, to make the world a better place for having been in it. How you do this exactly that's up to you, but it really is to make the world a better place.
I
While
mean,
you,
and to pivot a little bit, because I know one of the things you said you want to talk about was Tony Todd, and he is one of those guys. I think that's and the reason why I think his legacy is so endearing and he was so beloved because he definitely is one of those guys that always made the world a better place, who always made every movie better, made every appearance you hear a lot of stories about a lot of people, this and that, sometimes they're having a bad day or something, or they're just known to be difficult. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him. And I think, or when we talked about him on the podcast, he's just so many delightful stories. And for a guy who played so many menacing characters and had who could have such an imposing presence, he just was such a sweetheart to everyone. I never got to meet him in person, or at a convention or anything. I guess we just never like he did a lot of the conventions, but I guess for some reason I just never was at the one. But I've heard so many stories from so many people. And it's kind of like in that week that had a lot of darkness for a lot of people, to have his light go out. I was like, this is just an opportunity for all of us to kind of shine a little bit more light for the rest of, take a little bit of the light that he took away and kind of add our own a little bit, be a little bit nicer. Because when you're popular, you're famous, you're in demand, it's so easy to be, get high in your own shit. But he seemed like such a willing person to just, take time and talk to anyone and everything, whoever, however he could brighten someone's day. And I think that's again how you have a good career in Hollywood, is, being a good guy.
As you have been doing Dads from the Crypt, you've interviewed a lot of
Hmm.
people, yeah, an awful lot of people. Who has anyone really who has delighted you, maybe even more than you expected them to?
um I mean, probably John Kassir. I mean, that's kind of the easy answer, but it's honest. So when we started Dads from the Crypt, one of the things I want to do, because we're in this such an interconnected virtual world now, that you can reach out to anybody, through Instagram, or I can go sign up for IMDb Pro account. And people ask me, like, how do you get all these great interviews? Like, I send out like dozens of emails, for like every 50 emails I send out, I might get like back one, response that might be like, oh, he's not available at this time or whatever. Like, talk to us at the beginning of the year, which is usually code for, fuck off. But hearing no is like, okay, that you just don't want to do it. That's fine. I'm not going to get, whatever about it. So when I emailed John Kassir's agent and got a response back, so he was the first person we reached out to, because I mean, that was just the natural thing. And, first person on our list, John Kassir, voice of the Crypt Keeper, yada yada yada. I heard back within like a couple hours, and I thought I was being pranked. I was like, "There's no way." That was this. If only I'd known that was like a rarity. It's kind of like, you know, knocking out of the park your first time. But and then it's one of those things like a dog chasing a car. I was like, wait, how do I do an interview with someone? It never occurred to me like, how am I going to do this? It's more like figuring out if I could to figure out how or what it's going to be like. So I like did a ton of research, and I watched other people's interviews. And some people said to watch, I was talking to some friends, said to watch like the hot ones where they have like guests do, eat hot wings while they're being interviewed and stuff. But to watch his interview style, because he's a very good interviewer, and like that's not to try to ask the obvious questions, do your research, be prepared, go a little deeper. Um, so I did all this research. I found out what his favorite football team was. Just to kind of, just to have a chat, So we had like 40 questions. It was me and Jody. And as you know, John, he is a performer. He did a one-man show. He can just talk and talk and talk. So out of the 40 questions, I only really got to like five of them because he just kept talking, but in the best way, not like he's running his mouth, but like I'm just sitting there cracking up. Like he's telling me all these stories one
And you're
after
sitting there half the
another.
time thinking, Jesus, John, shut the fuck up. Shut
No,
up, John.
no, it's like
No, of
perfect.
course
Like
not, of
this
course,
is all,
but oh, but what if?
yeah. It was like, but he answered all my questions too, on just in the normal flow of him just talking. Um, and it was just I just sat there like, oh my God, like not this guy is like an iconic performer for many on many levels on many things, but he's just like shooting the shit with us and just being hilarious, cracking us up. And I was so nervous, and then it just felt like the most natural thing. So shout out to John.
Bravo, John.
But yeah, every interview, like I'm obviously very nervous for. I did a fantastic interview. I did like three interviews last week. It's just the way these things happen. So I
Who'd
interviewed,
you interview last week?
yeah, so I interviewed Michael Gornick, who he directed Creep Show 2 and was a longtime friend and producer of George A. Romero. Um, and one of the things we talk about, I guess, him and George Romero had a sports TV show together that they produced for NBC where they did like stories about athletes like in the 70s. And the first one was called Juice on the Loose. So I think it was produced by OJ Simpson. I can't remember the exact details, but I never really thought of George Romero as a sports person. So I thought that was really entertaining. So that was a great interview. I did another one for a woman named Libby Letlow, and she plays a role in the latest installment of VHS. A very memorable performance because those movies are anthology movies. They usually move very quickly. You don't have much time to set up a character or for a character to make much of an impression, but she made a very big, she does a really good job with it. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I need to find her, talk to her because she has an amazing performance. I'm not sure when this episode comes out, but it'll be out next week or so. And then the third one is a movie that premiered. There's a movie that premiered at Chattanooga Film Festival last year that Jody and Mondo said it's not horror, but you gotta watch it as soon as it comes out. So I'm like, okay. So it's this movie called Off Ramp. Now, Alan, do you know what a juggalo is? Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah. I think so.
It's someone who's like a big fan of the band and saying Clown Posse, and they wear clown
Yeah.
makeup, and
Sure.
it's all like subculture.
Yeah.
They made a Juggalo road trip movie, and I'm like, okay, I don't quite see how that's my kind of thing per se.
A Juggalo roadshow movie.
Road trip, like
Oh,
these two guys who are
road
Juggalos
trip.
road
Okay.
tripping to a festival called the Gathering of the Juggalos. It's like a huge festival every year. I was like, okay,
Okay.
sure, I'll check it out. If you get
Okay.
when Jody and Mondo recommend it, I'll watch it. And I was enthralled by this movie. It is to the 2020s as Easy Rider was to the 60s. That kind of like this is America through a subculture, trying to figure out outcasts, trying to figure out the American dream landscape. And it's like very violent, gruesome, but kind of wholesome way. But it's a wonderful movie. It, it had me within like the first minute, and I was just like when I was finished, I said I'm gonna watch this the next day or two. I'm gonna find this cast and crew, and I'm gonna talk to them. And I posted about it, how much I enjoyed it on Instagram. I tagged the director, and within minutes, he messaged me saying, "Hey, you want me to come on your podcast?" I was like, "Well, you beat me to it."
But that's excellent. That's the point of the exercise.
Yes,
That's why it works. It's when you started that first episode of your Dads from the Crypt podcast, did you ever envision that you would end up as connected as you are to the world that
no.
you
No, so yeah, so I had like the director and two of the stars. We did an hour long talk, and it was fascinating. I love story. You said that everyone has a movie in it. I think everyone has a podcast in
a
them. I think every
podcast in it?
movie has a podcast. There's a story behind every movie.
Oh God,
So,
yes.
which
Holy
is obviously
cow,
why I do a
yes.
podcast about movies. But I want to hear,
Yeah.
especially for a smaller indie movie that doesn't that hasn't gotten that much recognition that I absolutely loved, and I know other people are loving. I want to hear all about how it came to be, especially something so specific but also so poignant. Al, that's another movie I'm recommending to you. It's called Off Ramp. And
Often
the
for sure. I will check that out. Absolutely. I've got some
and
homework
if
in
it's
front of
not
me.
and if my interview is not out by the time this episode comes out, it'll be off within a couple days, if not within the week.
Um, um, I'm there. Uh, Going back to the EC Comics,
Hmm.
what's your impression of the rebirth of EC Comics?
Yeah, I'm really happy it exists. Does it need to exist? It's debatable. I think it's good to. It's one of those things that people that have been collecting EC comics since the 40s or whatever, nothing new is going to be really satisfying to them in the same way that the original is. That's just the nature of rebooting anything. but I'm really excited to have new generations. If anything, if it brings recognition to the EC brands and gets people to check out the older ones, then it's done. It's done a job. As far as being, a comic book to read, it's there's ones I really like, ones I really don't. I wish they would, excuse me, learn some lessons. Now, I don't know anything about comic books and how quickly they come out before, or how early they're written before when they come out and all that stuff. I'm assuming this takes,
What the
months and months
turnaround
ahead.
is. Yeah, yeah.
So I know it's like putting train track before a train. The train's always moving. You got to put track on the train. So I'm hoping they kind of hear some feedback and they make some adjustments, at least in the story editing department. I think that pretty much the art is always fun. It's always good, interesting. Um, and I love talking about it. I like reading them. I don't think they're inspiring. They're not, well, like I said, if they're inspiring people to find the old ones, that's great. I don't think they're groundbreaking per se, as the original was. But doesn't it kind of depends on what they're trying to accomplish. Um, I'm like I said, I'm glad it exists. I was talking to someone about when I picked up my last issues because I do get review copies like digital, but I want to support them, so I got a subscription at my local comic book store. So, but I only pick them up in batches. I'm not picking them up the week of. So last time I was there, I asked the guy how are they selling. He says, "Well, it's gone down since the original because the nature of an anthology means there's no story, so there's no cliffhanger to like drag people back." Um, so that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, it's the challenge. And if you do an issue or two where it's just not compelling,
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky as we know.
Right. If anything, I might like the Cruel Universe ones a little better. I think because they're a little bit more focused, where these are kind of all over the place. The epidemic of this a little bit more all over the place, so it can feel a little scattered. Well, Cruel Universe kind of has a lane. It's a very wide lane still, but it could go.
It's kind of the difference between sci-fi and horror, because sci-fi is always trying to tell you something about today in tomorrow's wardrobe.
Right.
And horror is just on a different mission entirely. It's just trying to weird you out.
Yeah, and sci-fi can be sci-fi. It can be comedy. It can be many things. Where I mean, sort of horror can be many of those things. Where sci-fi is usually a little bit more self-contained. I mean, it can still be it still has a couple different flavors, but far fewer than horror. Um, am I like mad about them or anything? No, not at all. It's got me reading comics. Hopefully, it gets other people reading comics. But
It's what's interesting to see in the new EC is the variety of voices.
mhm,
Because one thing, alas, about the original EC, it was a rather limited worldview.
right, yeah, and I don't know. I kind of wish they would actually say a little bit more about the authors or something, or or maybe that's just not bad. Maybe that's bad form or something like that, or I don't know.
They're artists.
Yeah,
They're creative people creating. They're entitled to their to reap the praise. Look, when you put anything out, anything creative out into the world, it's no longer yours,
yeah,
and that's the deal you have to make with the world and with yourself. Hey, if you don't make that deal, you're still going to do it, but you're going to get kicked in the nuts every single time, and you're
mhm,
going to take it very personally. When really, people will react as they react, but
right.
that's the deal. When you put stuff out, that
Well,
you,
and again, moving the conversation to the other topic you want me to talk about with the Mike Vosberg documentary, like
yes,
especially when it comes to like editing something, there's a million and one decisions you can make at any point in the film or documentary or whatever you're creating. There's a million and one decisions at every turn, and
yes, indeed.
you feel like, oh, which is gonna be the right one, which is gonna be wrong. All you can do is just kind of go with your gut, and it's you're kind of stabbing in the throwing a dart in the darkness a little bit and hoping it hits. Um,
be faithful to the story you're trying to tell, and really let that be the guide. It's uh, you've your Vosberg documentary was just at the at LA Comic Con.
Yeah, so the story behind that was last summer, I or is it last year sometime for our second anniversary. I wanted to get you talked to Mike Vosberg. So I knew you were in contact with him. Mike Vosberg's the guy who does all the Tales from the Crypt covers from the TV show for those of you watching on video, like like right here where I'm pointing my finger. Um and you and Gil did an interview with him, and then me being me, I'm like, well, I want to interview him too, but I'm gonna one up you guys. I'm gonna go to his house. I talked to him. I got his information and
Driving out the at the La Canyada, what is he? La
Bacchanal, yeah.
Canyada. It's like, what? My God,
Because for our
pack a
podcast
suitcase.
2 year anniversary, I wanted to get him do a picture of me, Jody, and Mondo. And you passed the request along to him, and he did such an amazing job. And then he was like, "Oh, do you want to come out and pick it up in person?" I'm like, "Sure." Wait, and I'm like, "Well, can I film it? You want to do like show me show me your studio?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I've got tons of art. My house I can show you." So I what's funny was that was the day after I got my first ever tattoo, which is the Crypt Keeper tattoo. So I'm just like, 6'4". I'm a larger person. I've got this like bloody tattoo all wrapped up, and you like wrap up a tattoo and it's got like, a package of like fluids seeping. It's really gross. And I'm like showing by this door, like with the film his house and everything. I'm like shocked he let me in,
The
but
man with the
he's such a
bleeding
sweetheart.
tattoo.
And we just decided to shoot the shit. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna whatever. I'm just filming with my phone on like a $10, gimbal thing I bought. Whatever I get, I could at least use the audio, make a podcast episode out of it, and maybe I'll cut it into something for YouTube. And I was there for like 4 hours. It was like so hot that my phone kept overheating, so we had to get like a pack of ice to keep my phone temperature down.
It
And
was your own little bordello of blood.
yeah, it was like a 1 day, guerrilla filmmaking. Um, and then I was like, and then I spent like a year. I'm like, well, I got so much stuff here. Let me see what I can do with it. And I enjoy film editing. I think if I was going to be in the film industry, I think I'd want to be an editor. Um, Again,
That is
because
where, but that's where the real storytelling happens.
exactly, because you have all the pieces. You just find the right order. It's kind of like building a Lego tower or something like that. Like I don't have to be there on set making decisions or dealing with the elements or whatever. Or you did all the hard work. I'm just kind of putting the puzzle together. And I've been doing I was doing a lot of editing with the Dads From The Crypt stuff, and I was like, well, I'm just taking the stuff I'm doing and putting it into a much larger context. I didn't realize how large it would be, because you want to keep it interesting, and then I want to make it multimedia with all these other pictures, because it's a very he does artwork, so I'll put all the art I can in there. Then you have to like make sure it all fits and time everything correctly. So I spent like 9 months or whatever, and there were times where I'm like, I don't want to look at this thing anymore, so I didn't look at it for like a month. I went through a lot of phases. And then I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I'm done. I think I got it exactly how I want it. And then actually I showed it to him, and then I filmed a little bit more because I'm a maniac. So I wanted to add another ending to it. Which I actually really love how he ended the film. Um, and it was just like, okay, it's done.
How
I'm putting a cap on
how do you
that.
end? How does the film end?
Well, I end it with him. So I showed him the video, and then I film his reaction to that draft. And I say, there's one thing that's missing, and that is you're an art of you to put on the poster for this. So I taped him drawing the poster for the documentary, and I asked him a couple questions and stuff, and then I just kind of did this like um what you call it, time lapse of him. When you see someone like do something really quickly. And I put some classical music over it, just kind of like a little ode to the art, the active creation, artistic creation. in the kind of a meta way. So he's drawing the poster for the movie that you're watching. I thought that'd be a cool way to end it.
Did did making a movie yourself change the way you see movies?
Um, I mean, this is barely classified as a movie, but like a home video. But
But you cut it together.
yeah,
You edited it. Yeah.
yeah,
How long is it?
it's an hour. I mean, I could easily cut it
You made a
down,
movie.
but
Jason, you made a movie. Same as anyone else makes a goddamn movie. It's still you took one long piece of film in essence and you broke it up into little pieces and rearranged them in parts. Same as
yeah,
anybody else. You made a
right.
movie.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes me appreciate the effort that goes into these things. The kind of make it work kind of thing, because you saw a couple of the early drafts and you gave me a lot of notes on like how to improve it, and I was very thankful for that.
Oh,
Um,
I just thought you should put yourself, you should be more present in it.
yeah. So yeah, so I saw a whole new opening and everything. I've always been a student of film. I took like I took a film class in high school, two film classes in college. For some reason, I never thought I could actually get into filmmaking. It's one of those things like if I go back in the time machine, I'll be like, get yourself down to Hollywood and go do something, young man. But I've always been the person where I like music. I just don't have a sense of rhythm or anything. So it's like I can emulate a riff on the guitar, but like a video game where I'm just like, okay, you press this button and that button and that button in the sequence to do a special move. That's how I play music. I don't have a sense of a rhythm, or I can't. You can play two notes and I can't tell you if they're in the same key or anything. I have like no musical talents. For film, I feel like I'm a little bit more, but it's also the same kind of thing where I can appreciate it. I don't know if I could write or direct something per se, but I feel like I can deconstruct it and reconstruct it. And that's kind of what, whatever form of film criticism on a podcast I do is kind of, my thing. And that's actually what I got out of those film classes that I took was how to be an active watcher of movies. So to be so you can be actively watching something or passively watching something. And when you're actively watching, you're thinking about where the camera is, what kind of the shot is, what the music is, what the lighting is, where people are in relationship to each other, how are these actors connecting, all those things. You're kind of actively taking part in where, other times you sit back, have a beer and watch, a comedy and laugh your ass off. Both are completely valid ways. But usually when I'm watching a new movie, I'm watching it more actively, depending on the setting. That's what those classes really taught me how to do. And
You're proving yourself wrong. The old you thought you couldn't cut it in this world and or get into this world, and the new you is demonstrating remarkable resilience to get into this world and to yeah, you are in this world. You're
I'm in a world. I don't know which world it is, but
but that whole world has completely fractured.
yeah.
It's not what it was. The separation between that, between the Hollywood world and everyone else is kind of gone. And in a sense, I think a lot of people are beginning to recognize that everyone's a star now.
Mhm.
Really and truly, for better and worse, but you know, it's a numbers game.
Right.
And
I
I
mean,
think the good outweighs the bad. It's just how it is.
well, you had your conversation with Gil and it turned into like him telling me all these amazing projects that he's got in the cooker, and that made me so happy to hear about that. And I talked to him in a couple months, and it was around the Jewish New Year, so I'm like, I'm gonna call him, wish him a happy New Year and everything. And we just chatted and everything. And it was just so delightful to hear, that kind of spark that was kind of back in his voice a little bit. And part of me was
Yeah,
like, you know what?
he's
If I didn't have a family that, I didn't have like to pick up my kids and drop them off from school every day, I'd say, you know what, Gil, let me be your associate producer or, whatever you need someone to be and go off to wherever, like Bulgaria, wherever you're gonna go film. In another timeline, I could do that, but that's just not my timeline at this moment.
at this moment.
At this
But
moment, yeah,
but
maybe.
you're a young guy. How old are you, Jason?
Almost 44.
Oh my God, you have several more careers in you yet.
Yeah, well, and I also started a new job last summer, so which, is my other career, but
For the moment.
yeah, for the moment. I mean, I said, who knows? But I do have. I've always wanted to be on like a real, like an actual film set, like while something's like film. Like I went to a taping of a sitcom rather recently, actually. But I just thought it'd be cool to just be on a movie set and just kind of see it all happen.
We'll have to make that happen for you, Jason.
Yeah, you
And
never know.
and a chair with your name on it.
Who knows? Um, but I just love watching new movies and being surprised and sometimes disappointed and having something to talk about or listening, having something to other people to listen about because I love again. There's this movie. There's a story behind the movie. It's so funny. Whenever I go to a movie with my wife, first thing I do as soon as the movie's over is I open my phone and look up IMDb so I can read all the trivia about the movie. Or if I'm watching a TV show and I'm like I'm like I have to remind myself not to look at I don't get any spoilers or anything, not to look up the trivia of the shows. I have to wait till I finish the entire series before I look things up. Because I just like the stories behind movies.
Yeah, the creative process of making these things
Mhm.
is can be sometimes or blood even more horrifying than whatever we put on the screen.
Right. But even like a lot of the classics, like I've seen Jaws some more times I can count. So I'm at the point where I'm like, I'd rather watch the special feature, which are unfortunately a dying art, it seems.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, it's funny when they used to have to hire a film crew to do all that backstage
mhm.
stuff. Now everyone's doing it on their phones.
Yeah, it's like that's probably the career I would take. I'd be the one that films the behind the scene things of a movie. I make the movie about the movie.
Sounds like a podcast.
Yeah. Did you see another movie to put on your list is called In the Violent Nature?
Again, no, I haven't seen it yet,
All
but
right,
but
Alan.
I'm not really a horror guy. I'm
I think so this one is like your basic Friday the 13th movie, like your basic killer in the woods, except in following the victims, it follows him. It's not his POV per se, it's like over his shoulder. And he's just kind of watching him walking around the forest. He hears a noise. He turns to the noise, follows the noise, kills some people, keeps walking. Here's another noise. Goes over here, starts, it's, but if they do it in a way, it's like a Terrence Malick or
it's
Steven
like
Soderbergh kind of movie. Like,
yeah. It's from
and
Malevolence's perspective.
yeah, but not even, yeah, but it's just kind of like, this is just what he is. He's like a shark.
Yeah.
Um,
There's no characterization happening.
Right. I mean, they give like a slight backstory, but yeah, that's all he does. But it's almost like, but it's relaxing. That's the funny part. It's like going through nature, you're going for a walk. It's just like, there's like a rhythm to it that's just like kind of soothing, even though this is like horrific monster.
Yeah, it's some occasional bloodletting and screaming, but aside from
Yeah,
that, yeah, it's a nature
I
walk.
really
It's
enjoyed it, but it just came out on Blu-ray or home release, and they actually filmed most of it, and they like decided they realized it wasn't good enough, or just like there was too many issues with what they had, so they ended up redoing the entire movie. But they put on the finished one all the behind the scenes footage of them making and all the issues they had because it pretty much rained the entire time, and that kind of like made it impossible to like do 90% of the things they want to do. So there's like almost as long as the movie of behind the scene footage of all the troubles they had trying to make the movie the first time, and then they scrapped it and redid it. So I thought that was very entertaining.
I'm telling you, Jason, there's a whole podcast in this. The material exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
All you do is review it, find it, review it, talk about it. Boom, man. There's a that's a podcast.
Yeah.
Huge
So
podcast. Well,
if I had the time,
Coster touched on what we'll give you a call shortly about that.
there we go. No, there's another podcast. If I was going to do another podcast, I want to do one about 90s movies because,
Okay.
that's kind of my era, when I was, my teenager years, whatnot, which again, it feels weird calling that an era when that's when you grew up. But that's like, there's a lot of underappreciated movies from that decade. I think people especially for the horror community, look down on that decade a little bit. There's just I think because of CGI and stuff, people became
Hmm.
much more reliant on style over substance. Um, so I mean, obviously there's some classics, Scream and Candyman, as we talked about, and a good handful of others. Demon Knight, of course. Um, but there's like so much
Of
more
course.
in there, and it's interesting to look back at that time, the kind of pre-internet or dawning of the internet era, in kind of a simpler time before 2000s kind of shook everything up.
We've covered horror then and now. I guess the last thing on my agenda was parenting then and now. What have now? How old are your kids?
So I have my twin 10-year-olds, and my oldest is turned 19 in September.
You have a 19-year-old?
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I was aware of that.
I,
You
I
have a
know we talked
19
about
year
passing, but yeah,
Yeah, 19-year-old. Yeah, I think I've just always been aware of your twins.
yeah,
Uh how how have you changed as a parent? Have you changed as a parent? How has parenting changed you?
yeah. It's the thing about kids is they don't give a fuck about you. They are the most selfish people in the world. So, and that pisses me off sometimes. Where I'm like, I just got home from work. I want to watch the game. I just need a couple minutes. They don't care. They want what they want. They have needs. Um, babies, man, they can't do anything for themselves. Um, so I think it, it's a constant like having to. I'm making myself sound like I'm a selfish asshole here, but it's really taking yourself out of. It's really about ego, and I don't mean that like I feel like I'm better than everyone, but it's like having to think about putting yourself in their empathy. I guess it might be a better word. Learning to be more empathetic to them, um, and understanding. And I think when you have twins, even if they are good sleepers, the chances that they're both going to be good sleepers at the same time is pretty rare. And my kids weren't necessarily good sleepers. I'll put it that way.
That'll change your life.
So what I just had to realize was I have to give up on sleeping when I want to sleep and sleep when they're asleep, even if it's the middle of the day. And that was a hard, and that like as a metaphor was a hard thing for me to do. It's like what I want doesn't really matter per se. I mean, to a degree. And there's ways to, work with your partner and figure that out. But it's kind of, they're sleeping, I'm sleeping. I don't care if it's the middle of the day. I need to get my sleep. It's kind of the giving over control, giving over like control, but giving over uh
What's the greater good?
accepting your powerlessness to your children.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
like kind of
yeah.
like kind of like the 12 steps. You are powerless over your children.
You committed to a decision that's bigger than you.
Yes, exactly. And it's more like in the relationship you can negotiate things, you can like talk things through. You can't do that with a kid. So it's a
Although
whole
they'll
other level.
negotiate everything with you, they'll
Yeah.
negotiate everything with you.
Like especially my daughter now, she's 10 going on 16. She has an excuse for everything, an argument for everything. And if I try to the more I try to put my foot down, the harder she digs in. So like, yeah, it's a major exercise in mindfulness and um sometimes it's not, and also realizing that sometimes it's not about the thing that she's talking about, it's really about something else. And I turn to my wife, like, afterwards, I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but is she being hormonal? And she's like, yes, she's definitely 100%. Um, so parenting's hard. Um, as long as you're not hitting your kids, I give you credit. And trust me, I felt that inclination. I have not acted on it, but I felt where that place comes from, the anger. But you know, and I would be surprised if anyone has never felt that at all as a parent. If you don't feel like, if you've never at least experienced the taste of where that comes from, then I don't know if you're engaged enough with your kids. Now, if going through with it is a whole other thing, but I think, you know, it's hard. It's really, really hard, but it is amazing too. Getting a hug from a child is the best feeling in the world.
Watching them succeed.
Watching them succeed, seeing them smile after performing, teaching them a lesson, have them actually follow through on the lesson. um, people always like talk about, like, is my kid going to be XYZ? Are they going to be like this or that? And I'm like, I just want my kids to be a good person. The rest will fall in line. I don't care how good. I mean, I want them to have good grades, but like, I'd rather them try and not get, and maybe not hit the mark on something than not have the fortitude to try at all. That to me is more important. Is having the confidence and fortitude to try and fail than never try.
Oh, really, truly, failure teaches everything.
Yeah.
Success teaches nothing.
Huge.
all success teaches is that your shit doesn't smell, and that's the wrong message. That's wrong. You might have succeeded, but your shit still smells, and now you're going to go and really fuck things up. But failure, all right, now you begin to figure out how not to fail again.
Well, yeah, it's more, and man, I remember easily into my 20s, how I learned to say I'm sorry or apologize or take ownership over my mistakes. That took me a really, really long time. And that's, it's a thing that you can model, you can talk about it, but you have to kind of fail enough times on your own to really get it through your head.
Best thing for you.
Yeah, no.
Alas.
Yeah, I mean, that's, some dad advice, let your kids fail sometimes. More times often than not, so that way they can learn, or at least like guide them, but allow them to not succeed.
I think that's, of all the parenting advice you've given over the course of all the episodes, I think that's the best piece of parenting advice, Jason. And on that bombshell, I'm going to say, God, thank you so much for being willing to turn around after we had, I think, a great conversation about those 3 EC comics, to then to spend some good FaceTime, and we actually got a chance to catch up and talk about life.
I know, we've been podcasting for like an hour and 45 minutes already.
Yeah. Who was it who says that podcasting is life? They're not wrong.
For sure.
It certainly is mine, and it's becoming more and more of yours.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for sitting in, and it's been such a hectic week. This is Friday as we're recording it for release on Tuesday, but it's been the perfect way to cap off what, I don't know, for me, is what's been a terrific week. This was putting a bow on it. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. And I wish everyone has a great Thanksgiving.
And from this point of view, podcast, we'll see you all next week, everyone. Thank you so much. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads From The Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.